Hello, and thank you for joining us. My name is Sarah Boyd, and I'm the president and founder of Operation Truth. Today, we have our very first interview with Mark Chrisman, and he's here to join us to talk about his Facebook group and a couple as podcasts and a couple of things that he's been doing for our fellow veterans down in Florida and otherwise. So, Mark Chrisman, thank you so much for being on our show today. Go ahead and please give us a brief biography of who you are and what you're doing for our fellow veterans.
Sure, and thank you for having me on, Sarah. It's a great pleasure.
Of course.
I started about 4.5 months ago doing a podcast for Gulf War veterans and Gulf War illness. My reason behind it was when I started this process of trying to get medical help almost 7 years ago, there was no information out there. And the information I was finding was grossly incorrect. I went through situations such as when I was Googling Gulf War illness or Gulf War syndrome at the time. There was no Gulf War illness. They were giving information such as, okay, since you're a Gulf War vet, you need to first go through a civilian psychiatrist. So I did that. And the civilian psychiatrist said, I see that you have issues. I see that you have PTSD. And if you need that diagnosis, I can do that. But you don't need me to get into the military portion of, and medical help. So I said, I agree, and I greatly appreciate it. And she gave me the paperwork that I needed. And I went into the VA and I said, look, this is what your website told me to do. Here I am. Here's my diagnosis. And the lady at the counter looked at me like I had two heads and said, well, you didn't have to go through all that. We do that here. I'm like, well, your website tells me to go to a civilian doctor first. So that was an issue. Once I did that and I was able to actually get into the system, they were very standoffish and didn't know what Gulf War illness was. So they were doing things like giving me a basic physical, or a checkup, or an annual, whatever you want to address it. And I would tell them, no, I'm physically fine. I have these other issues. At the time I was having memory issues and I had tremors. I didn't know what the tremors were. I just figured it was, something that happened over time. I attributed it to age, which didn't make a whole lot of sense. But at 25, 26 years old, what do you know at that point?
Right. So when you say they, Mark, are you speaking to the VA there in Florida, or which healthcare system were you going through at the time?
At the time, it was the VA healthcare in Broward.
Okay. And that's in Florida?
Correct. So I went to them for probably on and off for about a year. And it took me that long to get some kind of direction as a how to deal with the Gulf War syndrome. And every time I would use GWS or Gulf War syndrome, everybody looked at me the same way. They didn't understand. They didn't know what it was. I spoke to, I would guesstimate 6 primary care practitioners within the VA system. Not a one of them knew what I was talking about. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until I started talking to a friend of mine that I was working with at the time about my symptoms, because it was getting to a point where things were rapidly getting worse. My memory was going, and I was in a position where I was in management. I needed my memory. I was doing scheduling. I was taking care of important clients. I was taking care of actors, actresses. I was doing a lot of high-end work. So for me to forget an appointment or forget to call somebody, it was detrimental to the business I was in.
I bet.
So I was talking to him, and the first thing out of his mouth was, he's like, I'm considered more of like a conspiracy theorist, so don't take what I say seriously, but based on what you're telling me, it sounds like you have Gulf War syndrome. So that's how I first found out about it.
Interesting.
And that's what sparked that whole year-long investigation of trying to figure out what's wrong. So I went back to him and I said, I'm talking to all these people and nobody knows what I'm talking about. Is there something else that they're calling this or something else that they are, how they're describing what I have. And he said, no, it's just Gulf War syndrome. He said, I've seen it in the newspapers. It's not in the news or anything, but it's in the newspapers. And he showed me a couple of articles. So I read through them and I realized that there was really only one location that was talking about this. So I called the Miami VA, which is the big hospital down south. And I said, look, these are my symptoms. I suspect I have Gulf War syndrome. Who do I talk to? Well, I don't know what that is. That was a response I got. So I jumped on my bike and I rode down to the Miami VA and I started walking around the hospital asking people, do you know what Gulf War syndrome is? And after about 4.5 hours of walking around asking people, I found somebody who said, I think I know what you're talking about, but that's only in the West Palm Beach location, which is about an hour and a half north from where I was at the time. So I left, I jumped on my bike and I went straight up to the VA in West Palm Beach. I did the same thing. In less time, though, I was able to find somebody. It took me about 2 hours. I finally found somebody who knew what I was talking about, and they took me into the area where they actually had a placard on the door that says, testing for Gulf War syndrome. And nobody knew about this. So,
wow, the first time hearing about it at an actual VA facility.
Actual facility, that's what their purpose was. They had, in that one particular room, was what they did testing. They did testing for just that. So I talked to the lady there and I explained my symptoms and I explained everything that I was going through. And she said, yeah, it sounds like you might have Gulf War syndrome, but we have a pretty thorough test that we put you through. Just 2 days, 8 hours a day. And she said, usually the second day goes a little quicker than the first. So I went through it. The first 8 hours was grueling. By the time I was done, I could barely remember my name, let alone how to get home. It was rough. So I went through those 2 days, and they diagnosed me at that point with Gulf War illness, and Gulf War syndrome, and they diagnosed my tremors. They diagnosed fibromyalgia and PTSD, and that was it. And that was what I got service connected for, was just those two things, the PTSD and the fibromyalgia. They would not service connect me for anything else at the time. So when I spoke to the doctor, she said that when I come back, that I could go into, testing my memory here, I should have wrote it down. I forget what it's called.
That's okay.
But it was one of the buildings there on the property that you have to go to talk to somebody about adding things to your claim.
I see.
Every time.
For compensation and pension?
Yeah, well, it's not comp and pen. It was, they called it something else, and I can't remember the name of the life of me. I might have it somewhere in paperwork. I can tell you later. But so I went there, and every time I went to the doctor, I would go over there afterwards, because every time I went to the doctor, they were telling me, oh, you have this. Oh, you have that. Oh, you have this. And I'm like, great. So, every time I go to the doctor, I'm getting bad news. So I would go there afterwards and I would say, okay, add this to my claim. And they would tell me, in most cases, they would tell me that we can add it, but you're not going to get anything for it. It's a 0%. So I said, fine, so long as you have record of it, that's all I care about. So I kept adding things. In the meantime, I'm still going to Broward VA for my medical. I'm just going up here for the GWS testing and stuff. So once I completed that, I continued going back to the Broward VA. The primary care physician that was there still had no clue what GWS was, even though I had the diagnosis and I handed her the paperwork saying, look, this is what I have, these are the symptoms. She would still only do physicals and your basic, I got a cold or whatever you would do for a cold. She would never look into anything any further. So I said, look, at least send me to mental health so that I can talk to them about the PTSD issues and the nightmares and stuff that I'm having. And she said, fine. So she sent me to mental health, and I started talking to the lady there. Very nice. She seemed very knowledgeable in the first few visits. So I was starting to kind of get comfortable with the way she was handling things. And I told her about this nightmare. I don't know what your audience viewership is going to be. I don't know if I should share this nightmare or not.
Maybe not in detail, but just to inform our viewers a little bit about what it was like to go through it, perhaps your emotions and those type of feelings.
The emotions, the emotions were high.
Did it affect the body? Did it trigger any tremors or anything of that nature?
It didn't trigger tremors, but it did keep me from sleeping. It was enough. And I'd like to say that I never really went through the whole thing before it woke me up, but when I think about it, and the more I talk it through, the more I believe I was having a full dream before I woke up.
Mm-hmm.
So I would wake up and just pools of sweat. I mean, just sweating like crazy. I'd have to change my sheets that and then and there. And I didn't know, I didn't know why. I didn't know what was going on. So when I told her about this nightmare that I was having, she said, well, if it's keeping you from sleeping, then let's put you on, I forgot what it was. It was a generic for Ambien, I think. So she gave me a sleep aid. So I started taking that for about 2 weeks. And for 2 weeks, I was able to get between 4 and 6 hours of sleep. And the dream, the nightmare that I was having was kind of just dissipating. It was all broken up like white noise. So I was no longer able to give you detail. I could tell you a piece in this piece and that piece. I couldn't put it all together. So I think the Ambien was just knocking my dreams out and giving me a lack of ability to dream. So after about 2 weeks, I went back to her and I told her what was going on. I told her this, and she's like, well, we need to get you a good solid 6 hours of REM sleep so that you get rest. And I said, okay. I said, what do I need to do that? She says, well, I can up your dosage a little bit. You're only taking, I forget what they call it, a maintenance dose or something like that. So I said, okay, fine. So she did, and I started sleeping 6 hours. But I also woke up feeling like somebody had just run me over with a truck. I mean, I was just in pain. I was tired, and it just made me a whole lot worse than what I was. I could hardly function at work during the day. It was so bad. So I called her, and that was on a Friday afternoon. And I told her, I said, I got to do something. I said, I can't function during the day. I'm getting sleep, but I'm not worth a crap now. I can't do anything. So she said, fine, you come in Monday and we'll talk about it. So I did. And she took me off of that and put me on something else. And at that time, I had switched jobs. I was starting a new job on Monday. So I started the new medication. I'll be darned if I can remember what it was called. It's in my medical record. I could tell you later. But I started this new medication. And the first day, it seemed to be like the bomb. It worked fantastic. The second day, I started feeling like punch drunk. I was walking into stuff. I was losing my balance, and just weird things were happening. So I think it was midweek, like around Wednesday or Thursday. I was at a point where I was having a hard time making decisions or doing things, just the normal day-to-day things. At the time, I was a PC tech, so that was, it was easy for me. It's something I have been doing for years. So I was sitting there at work, and I turned to a friend of mine and I said, something doesn't feel right. And I passed out. So I woke up, the ambulance was there, and they're all looking at me and they're like, passed out. Are you okay? And I said, yeah, I feel fine. And they asked me if I'd eaten lunch, and there'd been still normal questions. So everything was fine. I went back to work, and they sent me on my way for the rest of the day. So I came back into work that Friday, and in the parking lot, as soon as I left my car, it was like I locked my car, and I turned and started walking towards the building to go inside, and I just face planted. I just to the ground. I was out cold. So somebody came out, they called the ambulance again and carted me off to the ER. They didn't figure out what happened. I didn't know any better. They asked me, if I was taking anything, am I using any drugs, all the standard questions they asked the hospital. And I said, the only thing I wanted was a sleep aid at the time. And they said, well, what are you taking? And I couldn't remember at the time because I wasn't keeping track of my medications. I was still too new to understand that I needed to do that. Mm-hmm. So they said, well, don't worry about it. We'll keep you here and see how you feel in a few hours. And if you're good, then we'll let you go, because there was nothing wrong. I had no heart issues, no migraines, no head issues, except for the bruises I had from falling.
Right. Like concussion, perhaps?
Yeah, right. So they let me loose. There was no problem that they could find. I spent the weekend just relaxing because I didn't know what was going on. I thought, well, maybe I drank something or ate something that interacted with what I was taking. So I spent the weekend just relaxing. So I called my friend Sunday afternoon and I said, look, I have to drop my bike off for service and it's going to be on there all week. Can you give me a ride this week? And she said, yeah, no problem. So comes to pick me up Monday. I'm getting ready and I get out of bed. I leaned over to put my socks and my shoes on. And when I did that, I just kept going.
Oh, wow.
I had no control over my body. I just went straight down onto the floor. So of course she shows up and I'm in my underwear, passed out on the floor, and she's banging on the door. And I had unlocked it. It was my thing to unlock the door when I wake up. I don't think I ever locked it that night, to be honest. And she came in and saw me on the floor. She called 911. So ambulance came again. They checked me out. Everything was fine. Pulse was fine. Blood pressure was fine. No idea what happened. So I called my mental health doctor and I said, I keep passing out and I don't understand what's going on. I've been to the ER twice now and they don't know what's going on. Is this something to do with medication that you're giving me? And she said, well, I'm not sure. Let me check on it and I'll call you back. So she calls me back and she says, okay, the medicine that you're on is most likely responsible for what's happening to you. So stop taking it. I said, okay, so what are we going to do in replacement? Because this is actually working. And she said, well, just stop taking this one and come see me. What was it? The following Monday, I think. Oh, no, it was Friday. It was Friday. So I said, fine. So I went into Friday and I talked to her. And of course, this whole time, that period, I was having those nightmares again. So I sat down with her and I said, look, and at this point, I was just a basket case. I was in tears. I told the woman, I said, I can't do this. I need something to stop this. And she said, okay, well, I have another medication. It's similar to the one you were taking, but it doesn't have that side effect. And I said, great, let's try it. She said, it's like a steroid. So when you take it, you're going to have to take small doses and then ramp up. And I said, fine. So I started it Saturday because I don't like starting new drugs on the beginning of the week for that reason. I started it Saturday. I slept fine Saturday night. Woke up Sunday. I was fine. Went all day Sunday. I was fine. I was out doing things. Went roller skating that day and some other stuff. And then Sunday night, I took it again. Woke up Monday morning. I was good. By Tuesday, I was numb. It was like I was just a zombie walking around the house. So I drank water because I had dry mouth, really bad cotton mouth. Once I did that, I was more coherent, I guess you could say. So I called my friend and I said, look, I don't really feel safe riding. I said, I can work in the condition I'm in, but I just don't feel safe riding a motorcycle in this condition. She said, oh, no problem, I'll come get you. So she comes and gets me. So I went to work. About halfway through the day, the room started spinning. And I looked over at my friend and I said, something's wrong. I don't feel right. And she's like, oh, no, not again. I looked at her and said, no, I'm not going to pass out. I said, I might throw up, but I'm not going to pass out. So she put my phone on hold because I was doing phone support. And I just sat there for a few minutes and waited. The manager came over and sat with me. And it cleared up and everything was fine. So I went back to work like nothing ever happened and finished my day. Again, what was it, Wednesday, Thursday? It wasn't until Friday morning she came to pick me up. And I was in that same state. I was sitting in the chair in my dining room, putting on my shoes and socks. And I sat up and I looked at her and my world just started spinning in every which direction. And she said she could see it. She said I was actually wavering like a drunk.
Wow. Did they ever find out what the cause was, or is it just from your reaction of the medication?
This one, I didn't find out until after I got into the ER. What happened was I decided to go to work anyway. And by the time we got to the parking lot, she didn't even get a chance to turn the car off before I passed out in the car. So she drove me straight to the ER from work. And they put me on a gurney and took me inside, and I had like 6 or 7 doctors around me, and it took them about an hour, and I told them everything, everything that I had been taking, what I've been dealing with. And one of the doctors, one of the younger ones, looked at me and he says, I think I know what your issue is. He said, but I need to run some blood tests on you to be sure. And they took, I don't know, 5 or 6 vials. And he came back and he said that I was suffering from something called hypokalemia, which is where your body just starts flushing potassium out. So I was basically having a medically induced heart attack.
Oh, wow.
So they kept me overnight. Actually, they kept me all weekend. I went in there Friday morning, and they didn't release me until Sunday afternoon. And I had a little over 18 bags of potassium put back in my body. So I had nothing.
Do you believe that's as a result of your GO4 illness or syndrome, not being able to process potassium, or was that from your medications that you're on for your sleep aid?
It was a direct connection to the medication I was taking. And it was actually one of those rare reactions that they list, like 0.1% get this. I'm the 0.1%.
I know all too well about that, my friend.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
I was just say that was a rough weekend for me.
It sounds like it. I'm so sorry that you had to go through all of that to find out that your medications that you're pretty much allergic to. It sounds like. I mean, you had a hypersensitive reaction to that medication. Were you able to ever find a sleep aid that you can use effectively?
Yes and no.
Well,
after that, I transferred my care to West Palm Beach. It was an hour drive for me to get there for every appointment, but I didn't trust the Broward VA after that. I told the lady, I said, you had 2 chances. I'm not giving you a third.
Unfortunately, that's the way the healthcare system is, at least through the VA, is they prescribe medications for your symptoms, and they use this approach that is, we're going to give it to you and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of approach. And then if that doesn't work, they'll try something else. And it's this hit and miss approach to healthcare that is making us even more sick. So kudos to you to standing up to those doctors and saying, we need better care. And if I have to drive an hour and a half away to get that, I'm going to do so. And it's unfortunate that you have to do that. So I'm sorry if you already mentioned this, but how long were you in the military? What branch? Were you active duty, National Guard, and did you end up going to Desert Storm?
I was there from start to finish. I did 2 tours.
So that was 1991 time frame, is that correct?
I believe the storm portion It was a storm. I get it backwards now. A shield. It was a shield portion. Shield was
I
the
did
first one.
the one that we were there before.
Yeah. I was there for the Cold War portion. I was there for the active war. We came back briefly. Unfortunately, we couldn't port because Hurricane Hugo hit our port. So we had to ride out Hurricane Hugo out in the ocean outside of our port. And then after the storm left, I think within a day or two, we were on our way back out again. So we really didn't get home port for long. But,
So you're in the
I was in the Navy. I made it to hull technician second class. I was in charge of shipboard security and firefighting. I was on the Hilo crash and smash team, so I was responsible for getting a burning helicopter off of our flight deck so that it didn't set us on fire.
All right. So during your duration over there, what were you exposed to? Anything that you can remember? Any different smells, chemicals that you might remember being exposed to?
I was exposed to so much, and so much that I didn't even know I was exposed to.
I bet.
Yeah. Every time we ported, I would walk through and take pictures when I wasn't drinking at the bars like everybody else.
Sailors.
Yeah, we were pretty bad. We used to walk everywhere, because a lot of the times the taxis were either expensive or they try to rip you off because you're American. So we did a lot of walking, and on those roads, on the roadsides, there was a lot of camels, dead camels, exposed bodies, not exposed, decomposed bodies, and just buildings smashed to bits that we had blown up. So we were exposed to just about everything and never even knew it. We were walking through towns without any of those indicators on our bodies. We were walking around in civilian clothes in most cases. So people didn't know unless, you could tell by my haircut that I'm military. So it was...
Were you in the area of Kuwait then, or where would you port?
When we went over, we went to several places. I was in Qatar a few times. I was in Amman, Daman, Saudi Arabia. We were there. Bahrain. There was just so many places we ported. We were in Djibouti, Africa, for a little while. I can't remember them all anymore, but we were all over the place. Our fleet was fairly popular because we were very inept in getting things done. So it was important for us to be mobilized all the time. We were at sea sometimes 6 months at a time.
All right. And how long after you got out of the military do you remember feeling those types of symptoms that were an indicator of Cold War syndrome?
My first symptom that I can remember was my tremors. Those hit me, I'd say, I think it was right after the first tour, while I was active. The second big one for me was my memory, but that was so subtle that I really had no idea what was happening until after I had gotten out, years after I'd gotten out. But that was probably the second thing that was the worst.
So your first symptoms were part of your neurological system, where you experienced more tremors and things while you were still on active duty, it sounds.
Exactly. And people asked me about it, but I never really paid attention to it.
Do you recall if you were given the anthrax vaccine or the botulinum toxoid or any of those other type of biodefense vaccines?
I will never forget the day that I got that anthrax vaccine. I think I could probably forget the world, and I won't forget that. We were all in a building, and there was a big bay window. It was like a one-way window. We were all standing. There was a metal bar across the front of it. And the doctor says, okay, everybody turn around, put your hands on the bar, drop your pants. We're going to give you a shot. And as they're walking around giving us this shot, they're telling us, okay, you're going to feel a little hard mass for a little while into your skin. And as everybody's pulling their pants up, and the corpsman says to everybody, he says, all right, I need you to pay attention to what I'm going to tell you now, because it's going to make a difference for you tomorrow morning if you don't. So we all laughed at him. And he says, any of you that sleep in the top rack, you need to slide out. Don't jump out like you normally would, because if you do, there's a good chance that you'll fall. And I, of course, those were my Superman days. There wasn't anything that could hurt me.
Okay.
I was in a top rack, and when we woke up the next morning, I jumped out and hit the floor, and I immediately went into tears. I went to the floor. I could not stand up. So everybody comes running over to me. They told you, they told you. And I'm giving everybody the bird. I'm sitting there in tears. So I'm waiting. The corpsman comes over, checks me, and he says, okay, you're going to be fine. This is a normal reaction to this. So I helped me back up, and I'm sitting on my friend's bunk on the one below me. And they said, you just hang out here for a little while and see if it gets better. Well, 3 or 4 hours later, I got to a point where I was limping. I could walk, but I was limping. So I obviously had a bad reaction to this drug.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't find out about first round, second round, I think probably until I spoke to you initially. I didn't realize there had been so many rounds of the shot. And also somebody else, I forgot her name, Denise.
Nichols?
Yeah, when I spoke to her, she had mentioned about it being broken up into several shots over a period of time, and I didn't know that either. I had only known about that one that I was given. So it's been an education process, as we move along, as I've done my podcasting and doing more involvement with Gulf War illness and what's going on now.
Denise Nichols and her crew and individuals that have been researching and working with the Research Advisory Committee for decades now, they have really gained so many amazing benefits through this research and funding through Congress. So do you recall what year you got your vaccine, the first anthrax vaccine?
I got it before my ship deployed. So I would guess maybe early 89.
Okay, so as far back as 89. So do you recall, besides the pain in your legs and when you jumped down from where you were sleeping and things, what else was there? Any type of tremors or anything after that? And how long do you feel the tremors started after that first anthrax vaccine?
That I'm not sure. That was, I think the tremors didn't start until, I don't remember, before my first tour. I don't think I had tremors before my first tour. I remember them after we came back, because that's when people started really asking me, because I always had steady hands.
Anything else for that first few months or years that after receiving that vaccine that you can remember that was just different, something that you couldn't pinpoint what was wrong? Or
well, even that was after the first tour. My nightmares started after the first tour, but I never told anybody about them, because the nightmare that I was having, like I said, is kind of a bit gory.
I remember what you experienced over there. It was very traumatizing. So I just want to say thank you.
The tour wasn't that bad. The first tour was really, that was our Cold War portion, and I don't remember any kind of shooting or anything like that happening at that point in time. I do remember seeing the dead animals on the road, but not near as many as I did the second time we went back. The second time we went back was bad. That was when I saw building rubble and bodies and stuff. It was significantly worse.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for your service, and thank you for going overseas and doing that part of being a sailor that a lot of us don't get to do, which is being part of war. And when you came back, did you feel that the country accepted you, was thankful for your service over there?
I wish I could say yes. I love the way they're treating the military now, whether it's real or not. When I came back, there were signs on people's front lawns, sailors and dogs keep off.
Oh, geez. So for you, it wasn't the shortest war, the 6-month-long war that everyone claims and continues to.
It's a 6-month-long war, physical war that's done and over with. And from that aspect, yeah, it's the shortest war. The war that all our veterans are fighting now, that's the war that's continued for 27 years and on.
So how's your quality life like now? Are you able to work, or what's affecting you today?
Unfortunately, because of my memory, my tremors, and my ability just to function day to day, I can't sit for very long. I can't stand for very long. I either have to be in a laying position or walking and moving. It's all painful. I had not been able to work since January of 2018. And I filed a claim both for the VA and Social Security. And I finally, as I was telling you the other day, got my Social Security case. I got a date for that in March. I'm still for the VA.
So close to the end of the line.
Yes. So I'm excited about that.
I'm excited for you as well. So just briefly, how long did it take you to gain your VA benefits, your percentage that you're at now?
I did it in levels because I didn't do it the right way. When I went in initially, like I said, I had all the wrong information. I was able to get, I think I was at 40% the first time around. And as things started progressing in my health, I was finding myself, parking on the side of a highway because I couldn't ride. I was getting claustrophobic in my helmet. I was having all kinds of mental related issues that I was having a hard time getting past. So that got me to 40%, I think. And then I went back again and I told them, and I need help with what's going on. There's just not, I can't function. So they helped me along. And then of course I took their diagnoses over to the building that I cannot remember the name of. And I said, look, this is what's going on. And they said, okay, fine, let me set you up with a compensation and pension exam and they'll be able to tell you whether or not, you've gotten worse or what's going on.
So going forward, what would you tell them the right way would look like so that they would have to struggle as much?
Right now, the VA website is the best place to go. The information there is now finally correct. So it's sending people to the right areas and getting them started. The easiest way I would say to do it is to use your patient advocate.
Is that the VA public health website?
Yes.
Okay.
You can go to va.gov. You can go to, what is it? Something benefits.org, ebenefits.org. They have the correct steps. Or they're welcome to message me and I'll send them the links myself. It's not a problem.
What's the best way to reach you?
You can find me on Facebook at Gulf War Vets, or you can search me on YouTube, Gulf War, The Battle After the War. You can also find me on all of the podcast platforms, except for iHeart. I don't think I'm on iHeart. That's one to come. But I'm on all the other ones. I'm on Apple. I'm on all of the major ones.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today. Tell us a bit about what your next podcast is going to be about and when we can hear you again.
My next podcast is going to be this Wednesday. I release a new one every Wednesday. This one coming up is kind of a reflection on my year and how I dealt with things and how I'm going to deal with my future. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
Well, we look forward to hearing from you on your podcast, and I hope that you can come back on our show once again. Thank you so much for your time today and coming on our show. And I'm sure if our viewers have any more questions or comments or concerns that they'd like to speak with you, they know where to reach you. Thank you again, Mark, for coming on, and have such a great New Year's and future to come.
Thank you, and you too. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Take care.
Alrighty.